we're so indoctrinated. And I just like, my goal is to just keep trying to unindoctrinate people with this, because it's really scary. And what it really is it's projecting, because the only genocidal people are the people in Israel. And so when they say from the river to the sea, and I would also suggest to people that there's things called like figurative and literal. And when people say that they want to get rid of the Jewish state, that doesn't necessarily mean they want to get rid of the people. Okay, that's not a genocide. That's talking about a change in geopolitics and in the structure of a nation state. I don't understand how that equates to genocide for
because
people.
Again, you have to create a narrative that allows people to believe that what they're doing is right, even though deep down I think most know what's happening is wrong.
I'm not buying it with them anymore. I'm done with that.
If you cannot get past the emotional component that is religion, of which I think is all bullshit across the board. Yeah, I said it. What cannot be denied is what's now being leaked, no pun intended, is that Gaza is a natural gas rich land. And they are now figuring out a way to parcel it off to the 5 biggest oil companies.
They've already started. Apparently leases were set up in June or July or something.
So now you can have an opinion about the justification or why this is happening. What you cannot talk your way out of or around is what is happening on Gaza soil and what they did in order to make it so that they could do that. They basically leveled the entire place. And so now that they've leveled it, they now have an opportunity to get filthy rich because of it. It's trillions of dollars in natural gas resources that is in Gaza that they want to take out of the land. And so could you speak on that specific issue and how the financial motivation, much like in Ukraine and almost every other war that's ever been fought in the history of mankind,
there's a lot of natural resources,
gets back to money and power, as it always does?
Well, I don't want to speculate, because I think that, well, one, Israel has been very savvy at taking resources, even if under international law, it may in fact belong to the Palestinians. So I don't see that as stopping them in taking whatever natural gas they believe is theirs in the Mediterranean Sea. But I think the more interesting question is why Israel was allowing Qatar to fund through suitcases of cash, and this was reported on in the New York Times, where for years Qatar was funding Hamas.
Yeah,
yes.
And Hamas was the government in Gaza. It was an authoritarian government because it had a civil war with Fatah. They killed many Fatah members and excluded or deported the rest of them, and that was reciprocated in the West Bank. So there was kind of this Cold War between the Palestinian Authority that controlled the West Bank and Hamas that controlled Gaza. And so the Israelis benefited from having Hamas govern and take care of the very difficult day-to-day operations and management and governance of 2.3 million civilians, as long as they accepted, and they had to, the complete control of the borders, such that Israel's calculation of how much humanitarian aid could come into Gaza was literally based on a calorie count that was above famine, but below, comfort, so that the Palestinians had just enough to eat that they could survive, but not so much that they actually could live decently. And why did Israel do that? Why did Israel continue to allow all of this cash to come in suitcases through Tel Aviv by Qatari representatives to Hamas? Because they needed Hamas, and Netanyahu has gone on the record to say this, and so has his other members of his right-wing government. We need Hamas because it's a designated terrorist organization in the laws of the U.S. and in Europe, so that can justify anything we want to do that's in violation of international law, in violation of UN resolutions, in violation of even our promises that we make to the Western public. We build our settlements, we blockade, we do as we steal gas, we do whatever we want because, well, there's a terrorist organization, so we've got to protect ourselves. So it's this global war on terror mentality that infected our country and ultimately led us to waive many of our civil rights and civil liberties. And it's that same framing. But I want to get back to your issue of this, what seems to be this obsession of always being a victim of anti-Semitism. The report that we published recently called Presumptively Anti-Semitic, the Islamophobic Tropes in the Palestine-Israel Discourse, it really it seeks to expound or explore that and unpack it and show how that's actually not helpful for Jews. Right? Not only does it cause discrimination and vilification and racist tropes against Muslims, right? Because we are not raised to hate Jews. We are not raised to hate Judaism.
I know.
Jews are people of the book. We consider them, a part of our monotheistic tradition. But what's unfortunate is if anti-Semitism is expanded so broadly that then it has no meaning, that it's really, oh, well, if you politically disagree with me about foreign policy in Israel, you're anti-Semitic. If you politically disagree with Israeli state practices and policies and human rights record, you're anti-Semitic. That then means anti-Semitism doesn't really mean what it should mean. Right?
Yeah.
Individualized hate towards a Jew because they're Jewish, attacks or assaults or vandalism against a synagogue, discrimination against a coworker or a subordinate because they're Jewish, or hate crime. Those are anti-Semitic activities, and they should be condemned, and they should be prevented, and they should be, criminally prosecuted or civilly litigated. But I think many of these Zionist organizations are really hurting and undermining the important struggle to combat anti-Semitism in the West by essentially just completely collapsing its definition and making anti-Zionism the same as anti-Semitism, which it's not.
Right, which is amazing to me that we had an entire Congress sign a paper that said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I almost just don't even know what to do with that. And they signed it, most of them, by severe account, most of them. And how? It's factually incorrect. I would suggest that Zionism is actually very anti-Semitic. The concept that all Jews are some sort of ethnic monolith is extremely anti-Semitic. I think that that's the problem. There's a lot of problems, but what concerns me is how it affects us. Coming full circle to what's going on our campuses. And I'm curious how Palestinian students, what their comfort level is with the Jewish groups on campus. I know, when I went to school, Hillel was a big thing, and I was in Colorado, and there aren't even that many Jews in Colorado, and Hillel was big, but I would think that might make people feel very uncomfortable. So how is that not being addressed at all?
Well, what I've heard from Palestinian and Arab and Muslim students is that they are getting absolutely no empathy, no care, and very little, if any, attention by the administration. At the same time that there is this obsession with the feelings and the opinions and the perspectives of Jewish students, particularly those that support right-wing Zionism. And that has caused many of these students to feel alienated, marginalized. And in fact, what's happened, and I think it's a positive development, is that many faculty have realized these administrators are biased. They are not fairly treating our students. They don't seem to have the same care or empathy towards all students. And so the faculty now have started something called Faculty for Justice in Palestine, which we have at Rutgers and at NYU, and they're starting to grow across the country. And they have become effectively the support group by faculty to ensure that, in fact, if there is a suspension of SJP, that the law has been followed, that they have the support of the faculty, that the faculty will protect free speech, because many of us have realized that this commercialization of the academy of higher education, turning it into this effectively like a capitalist corporation as opposed to a university, a place of learning and higher education, is that presidents serve the stakeholders, they serve the donors, and they serve the board of governors, who are usually donors, and that's the only people they seem to serve. And the students, to hell with the students. And the faculty, the only reason the faculty get to stay on is because they're tenured, and they're also trying to get rid of that, right, by adjunctifying all the faculty positions and getting rid of tenure track lines. So this is part of a much broader crisis in higher education, and we're just seeing kind of one of the worst case scenarios of what happens when you have these structural problems. But I think that when students don't feel safe as a result of very, aggressive, violent, or well, even if they're not violent, but aggressive, hostile presentations or protests by student groups that are pro-Israeli, the administration behaves with a deep respect for the First Amendment.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.